Okay, so the first problem, we're looking at the output of food, clothes, and entertainment for an economy in 2009 and 2010, and then we have the prices for 2009 and 2010. And we're going to use 2009 as the base year. So what they're asking us to do is, first of all, compute the nominal GDP for 2010, and then the real GDP for 2010, using 2009 as the base year. So the way we do that is we simply take the total total cost, or the total price of the output for 2010. So that's going to be the price right here times the quantity, and we just add it up. So we just take the price times the quantity for food, plus the price times the quantity for clothes, plus the price times the quantity for entertainment, and we get a total GDP, nominal GDP of $145. Now, what we do for the real GDP using 2009 as the base year is we simply use the output for 2010 times the prices of the base year. So as you can see, the price for food didn't change at all, but the price, we have a higher price in 2010 for clothes and entertainment. So we're going to use the lower base year price to get the real GDP, which is 100. Okay. So we just simply, when you're looking at computing the real GDP and you have the base year that's going to be identified, you simply use the output of the year that you're computing and the prices from the base year, whatever that is. Okay. Now, the next thing it's asking us to do here is, if we know that the price index is going from 50 to 55, and we're trying to compute the rate of inflation, well, we simply compute the percentage change between the price index of one year to the next. So that's easy, right? You just simply compute the percentage change going from a 50 to a 55, which is where you ended up where you started, subtracting from where you ended up divided by where you started. That's going to give you a 10% annual rate of inflation. Now, the last part of this is I'm going to take a little time to explain it using a math example, just so you really understand why the answer is the answer. So they're asking us here to assume that Sarah gets a fixed rate loan, and the expected rate of inflation is 3%. And if the actual rate turns out to be higher, if the rate of inflation turns out to be higher than the expected, who is going to benefit? The borrower, who is Sarah, the lender, the bank, or neither? So I did a little simple example here. So let's say that Sarah, actually, I spelled her name with an H, which is fine. Sarah borrows $1,000, and she rate, that should be rate. Okay. Rate. Oh wow. I'm trying to put R in there. There we go. So her interest rate for the bank is 8%. Now let's say that she's going to just pay it all back at once. So the end of the year she's going to owe $1,080 because 8% of 1,000 is 80. Now, with the expected rate of inflation of 3%, that means that what that really means is at the end of the year, it'll take 1,000 plus 3% to buy the same amount of goods and services that $1,000 bought at the beginning of the year because of the 3% inflation. So anyone in this economy is going to need $30 more at the end of the year to buy the same amount of goods that they could buy at the beginning of the year. Okay, so in order for the bank to get a benefit from this loan, and let's just assume that the bank wanted to earn 5% interest. So in order for them to get 5% real interest, they're going to have to charge Sarah 8% minus the 3% inflation is going to give the bank 5%. Now, if the actual rate ends up being higher, if the actual rate of inflation ends up being higher, that means at the end of the year it's going to take $1,040 to buy the same amount that you could buy at the beginning of the year for $1,000. So the buying power has actually dropped more. 1,030 does not have the same buying power as it would have had if inflation had only been 3%. With 4%, you have to have more money to have the same buying power. So now, if the bank still charges Sarah 8% interest with an inflation rate of 4%, they're only going to benefit 4% real interest because of the higher inflation. So that shows you that mathematically, Sarah's going to be better off because she still only has to pay back nominally, no matter what the inflation rate is. Her payback amount is still only $1,080, right? And why is that backwards? I do not know. That should be 4%. 4%. So when we look at that, we can see that the real interest rate on her loan now is only 4% instead of 5%. So she's really only paying a real interest rate of 4% because of the higher inflation. So the higher inflation is going to help the borrower and hurt the lender. So with a higher rate of inflation, the buying power of the total amount that she pays back on the loan is lower. So the bank is actually getting back less real dollars, less buying power than they would have if inflation had have been the expected rate of 3%. So and then I go on to explain that. So the bottom line here is because of the higher rate of the actual inflation, the dollar amount of Sarah's loan repayment has less real value. And that's how you would explain that and say that the borrower would benefit and the lender would not, would actually get less real value out of the loan if the actual inflation ended up being higher than the real. Okay, so that's the long, but I wanted you to see how that actually works, so you wouldn't just say, well, I'm just going to memorize, what the answer is. I want you to see exactly why the answer is the answer. Okay, so does anybody have any questions on how inflation plays a role in the interest rate of a loan? Okay, so just to show you, just so you see full disclosure here, the book gives you a really simple. They just say 1 point is earned for stating that Sarah will benefit because her fixed loan payments have less value. So you don't have to go through, just so you know, you certainly don't have to write the kind of answer I wrote. I just did that so you could see, more thoroughly or have a better understanding of why the answer is the answer. Okay. So problem 2, we have a country that has an unemployment rate that is greater than the natural rate. And then they want you to draw a supply and a demand, an aggregate, the demand and supply graph, labeling the current equilibrium in the economy labeled as YC, the output, and the price level is PLC. Okay, so that's going to look like this right here. Now, when we say natural rate of unemployment, that is like saying where we would be at the potential GDP, or where our output would be at the long run, where the long run aggregate supply is. This is where we would be right here at the natural rate of unemployment, which is typically somewhere between 3 and 5%. Like right now in the United States, I believe we're below 4%. So we're really about right here now. Okay. So we're operating very close to our potential right now. But as the problem stated, we have the unemployment is higher, greater. So there's more unemployment. So that tells us that we're below our potential. So you want to draw your market, or not your market, but you want to draw the economy's equilibrium at a price level and an output below where it would be at a potential. So you want to draw it just like I have it here. And this would show us that we are in a recession, because typically when you're in a recession, or not typically, but by definition, when you're in a recession, you have your level of unemployment is higher than the natural rate. And if you think about the PPF, the production possibilities frontier, you're at a point inside the curve. Okay, that's what that's going to look like. Now, next, they're asking us to, they're saying that you've got 2 different economic advisors, Colas and Raymond, I guess. And the first one, Colas, advises the president to lower personal income taxes. And you need to show or explain how that would affect aggregate demand. Now, you don't have to draw it if you're taking this as an exam, because it doesn't tell you. And in the answers, it doesn't actually draw it. But I'm going to draw it because I want you to see it. So what's going to happen when we lower personal income taxes? What that means is when we think of consumption as part of the aggregate demand function, consumption is income minus taxes, right? That's going to be your disposable income. And what this small a right here is, the small a is your marginal propensity to consume. So let's say that whatever your income is minus your taxes times, let's say you're going to save 20% of your income and spend 80. So this the variable right here, the small a, would be 0.8, right? But anyway, this whole expression is your consumption. So when taxes go down, it means your disposable income goes up. So your consumption is going to go up. And if your consumption goes up, aggregate demand goes up. So you would have a shift in the aggregate demand curve to the right, okay? That's what theoretically would happen if you lowered personal income taxes, and that's why, okay? Now, next it's asking you to do something you haven't ever seen before. So this is a brand new graph. It's asking you to draw a correctly labeled short run Phillips curve and show the effect of the decrease in personal income taxes by labeling the initial equilibrium in part A as point A, and the new equilibrium after the shift in the aggregate demand as point B. Okay, what does that look like? Looks like this. So what is the Phillips curve? A Phillips curve is an illustration of the relationship between the inflation rate on the y-axis or the vertical axis and the unemployment rate on the horizontal axis. So as unemployment drops, as we get more and more of people going into the workforce, and hold on, my lights is gotta stand up. There you go. If you don't move around in here, the lights go out. Okay, anyway, as more and more workers go into the workforce, price levels or the inflation rate goes up, right? So we see that right here. As we shift the aggregate demand to the right, as demand goes up, the companies are going to hire more workers, employment goes up, or we could say unemployment goes down. And then with the aggregate demand shifting to the right, price levels are going to go up, right, up to here. So we're showing that on the aggregate demand supply graph by the shift in the aggregate demand. We show it on the Phillips curve by a movement up and along this downward sloping curve, showing an inverse relationship between the inflation rate and the unemployment rate. As we get more and more workers going into the workforce, the unemployment rate drops, the inflation rate or price levels go up, okay? So really all you need to put, I put more on here than you have to have. What the book answer is, I'll just show you is a very simple graph. You just got to show point A and point B. You don't have to show everything that I showed, but it's helpful though. It's helpful to understand, what's actually happening here. Okay. So this is what the Phillips curve, the short run Phillips curve looks like. Now, the next thing they're asking us to do here is, we've done that. So, okay, a C. Okay, Raymond, the other economic advisor advises the president to take no policy action at all. So what will happen in the short run? What will happen to the short run aggregate supply curve in the long run? Now, just to be honest with you guys, I don't like the way this question is written at all, because they're asking about the short run and the long run, which I think is kind of dumb, but this is their exam, so we're going to have to deal with it, okay? Anyway, so what happens? So if we don't do anything at all, here's what's going to happen. When unemployment right here at the beginning, let's get this out of the way. So we haven't done anything with taxes at all. We haven't done anything. So since we have a rate of unemployment higher than the natural rate, what's going to eventually happen is that wages are going to drop. This is sort of the classical, you're just getting to this. I mean, you're not going to get to this till I think chapter I can't remember. It's like chapter 13, I think. I'm not sure. But so we're kind of ahead here in terms of the book. But the classical theory is that when you have an oversupply of labor, when there's more people who want the work than can find it, what will happen is wages will drop. Wages will drop because naturally, when there's an oversupply of something, prices start to fall, right? So the price of labor are the wages. So when with a high rate of unemployment, wages tend to come down. Now, when wages start to drop, wages are a part of the production cost. So when wages drop, production cost drop. And when we have a overall drop in the cost of production, our short run aggregate supply curve shifts to the right. So it's going to shift to the right. That's what's going to happen. And you're going to have, to the right. Correct me, guys. That was to the left. Somebody should have yelled, "Hey, Mr. Charlton, that's not shifting to the right." It shifts to the right, the other right, that right, okay? So because costs are now lower, so at every price, at every level of output, costs are now lower because wages are lower. So you have a rightward shift. And so theoretically, you're going to get back to full employment, not by increasing a demand, but by having lower cost and more supply, so an increase in aggregate supply because of the lower wages. Okay, so that's what you would say there. Okay, the aggregate supply would shift to the right, and real output would go up, right? Because if you think about this, you're going from YC to YP. So the aggregate, the short run aggregate supply would shift right, prices would drop, see, to here, from here to here, and output would actually go up, okay? So let's see, now we're going to get to the last part, but I want to just show you the book answer is very simple, actually. It's real small, but where are we here? 1 point is earned for explaining that wages will fall. The business will have to hire more workers. Well, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry. 1 point is earned for stating that so all they say here is the short run supply curve will shift to the right. They don't give you, you don't have to put everything that I put, but it's important to know that. Now, this part is the next part of it, which is right here. Okay, now, well, hold on 1 second. Let me just see what they're showing here. Let's see, we're down here. Okay, so they're saying wages will fall. I'm trying to match up the answers with the questions.
I think the answer, like the first two answers, are to answer the scene one, like just explain is the second answer.
Yeah, they're kind of confused. Yeah, this is confusing how they do this because I don't really like showing you these book answers, but I want to make sure that because it's confusing sometimes because they don't really explain it fully, right? So we're at this point right here. 1 point is earned, so the short run shifts to the right, and then 1 point is earned for explaining that wages will fall. I'm just trying to figure out what that's responding to. Businesses will hire more workers. Wages will fall because they don't really number it here. Oh, I see. I see. Jeez. Okay. So what happens is that let me get you guys out of the way. So a real output's going to go up. Now, when the short run aggregate supply curve shifts to the right, that's going to bring price levels down, right? So, but you know what? I had, I'm thinking right now, I'm kind of having a brain dump because I'm not sure exactly what they're responding to here when they say wages will fall. But what happens here, though, is that you're going to have a shift. Let me go back again. Let me make sure I'm getting this. I'm answering the right thing here. Okay. Oh, short run Phillips curve. Okay, I was misreading that. Right. Okay, now I understand. Okay, so when you have a shift in aggregate supply, right? Then what's going to happen is that because price levels go down, that means because you're actually lowering. Okay, let me go back now. Okay, sorry about that. When you shift here, right? This shift right here means that every level of every level of employment. See output. See, well, here's what is confusing. Output right here is also a measure of employment, right? So it's sort of implied, right? This Y is output, overall output. But obviously, in order to get more output, in order to increase output, you're going to have to increase employment, right? That's just sort of the implied part of this graph. But in the Phillips curve, on the horizontal axis, they're not implying it. They're being very explicit, right? So when this curve goes to left to the right, when this graph moves left to right, output goes up, employment goes up, right? Well, this graph right here is moving from right to left because this is unemployment. So when output goes up, the unemployment rate goes down. So at every level, at every price level, the rate of unemployment is lower. So you actually get a shift to the left. Yeah, in the Phillips curve. So you're actually going from. So you're actually, if we didn't do the tax cut at all, we just go straight from here to here, right? You would go. You would shift, and so you would get back to your natural level of unemployment. But once again, the long run Phillips curve is vertical. The long run Phillips curve is vertical, just like the long run aggregate supply curve is vertical, because there is only one potential GDP, and that does not change. Just like there's only one natural rate of unemployment, and that does not change. So this point right here, if we're here, right, we're also here. Okay, but this is going. We actually gain by going from left to right. This is if we move from left to right on this graph right here, we're growing, right? On this graph down here, we're growing when we move right to left. Okay, hopefully I haven't completely confused everyone. So what's going to happen here is you're going to have a lower rate of unemployment and also a lower price level because there's a shift. So the shift in the short run aggregate supply causes wages to drop because price levels drop. And when wages drop, that's going to mean more people can be hired. So That's your answer, okay? Now, let's go back. Now, the way the book answered it is a little bit, same. They just show the shift, okay? And it's a leftward or a downward shift. And the way you explain it is that when the aggregate supply curve, I've got it over here, when the aggregate supply curve shifts to the right, real output goes up. However, price levels drop, okay, down to here, so wages are going to drop, okay? Does everybody understand how that's going to work?
Mhm.
I take silence.
Yes.
What?
Yes.
Okay, now we're going to talk a lot more about the Phillips curve when we get in a later chapter. But because it was in this equation, I was trying to find the questions that they actually had on the exam that dealt with either inflation or unemployment. And the only questions that they have that deal with unemployment include the Phillips curve. So I had to put it in there. Okay, so you got a sneak preview of the Phillips curve. Okay, number 3. It won't take long at all because it's a whole lot like number 1. Okay, it's got just a little bit, a few differences. Okay, so I want to talk about that. So it's asking you, let me jump back, sorry about that. It's asking you, first of all, to compute this year's nominal GDP. So you do it the same as you did it in problem 1. You just simply multiply the output times the price, and you get this year's GDP of $6,000. Okay. Now, the next thing that it's asking you is it's asking you to assume that the GDP deflator or the GDP price index is 100 in the base year and 150 this year. And they want you to calculate the rate of inflation between the base year and this year. And then they want you to figure out this year's real GDP. So what we do is we simply use this relationship right here, and we say, okay, the index went from 100 to 150, and we know that the GDP this year is 6,000, so the GDP in the base year has to be 4,000 for this ratio to be an equality. And then we can simply either figure out the percentage change in the two different GDPs from one year to the next, or we can figure out the percentage change in the two different GDP deflators or price index numbers, which are the same thing. So don't be confused. You're going to see a GDP price index, and you're going to see a GDP deflator. You might see either or, but they're basically the same concept. Okay. So anyway, so you can use either one of these, either the actual dollar amount of the GDP or the deflator to figure out that the rate of inflation is 50%. Now, then we know that the real GDP is the nominal GDP divided by the index number times 100. So we simply just plug in the numbers and we compute that the real GDP is 4,000, which makes sense because if the index number is 100, then that's your base. If the baseline is 100, then whatever we got right here is going to be the real GDP here. That's just the math, okay? So you end up getting a real GDP of 4,000, okay? The next thing that they're asking us is if the workers received a 20% increase in their nominal wages and if they're facing the same rate of inflation that we figured out in B1, which is a 50%, what's happened to their real wages? Well, that's easy. If we have a wage increase of 20%, and the inflation rate is 50%, then we just simply subtract, and the real wages, the real value of their money actually dropped by 30%. So they actually, because of this high rate of inflation, they actually took a pretty serious pay cut in real dollars, okay? So the next thing they're asking you, and I went in more depth than you really have to, but I wanted you to really understand how this is going to work. So if D here, right? If the GDP deflator in Galoland increases unexpectedly, would the borrower with the fixed interest rate loan be better or worse off? So this is very much like what they ask you in problem 1. You just have to figure out what happens, what they're actually talking about if the GDP inflator gets higher. So the way we can look at that is we know that the GDP deflator is the nominal over the real. So we originally had a GDP deflator of 150. So let's say it went higher. Let's just assume it went from 150 to 160. Well, in order for that to work mathematically, now our GDP this year has to be $400 higher, which means that the prices up here all have to be a little bit higher in order to get 6,400 here instead of 6,000. So we know that when the GDP deflator goes up, that tells us that we have a rate of inflation. And we can figure that out just by looking at the percentage change between 160 and 100. As you know, instead of up here when we did 150 and 100 and got a rate of 50%. Well, if we use a higher GDP deflator down here, we're going to get a higher rate of inflation. And just like in problem 1, if the rate of inflation is higher than expected, the borrower is going to be better off, just like Sarah in problem 1, because the real value or the buying power of the money the borrower is paying back is actually lower. She's paying back actually less real value, okay? And the way the book explained it, very simple, or the way they did on the AP is they just simply said that the borrower with a fixed rate loan would be, the answer is, is that they would be better off, because if with a higher inflation, the borrower is paying back the loan using fewer real dollars. So you could say it that way if you want to, but you could also say that that the buying power of what she's paying back is actually less. Either way, okay? Okay, that's it. So I'm going to come back to everyone. First of all, before I quickly take attendance and let you guys go, does anybody have any questions?
No.
Okay, good. So you're going to have a little bit of extra time for assignment 5. It's not due until December 2nd because of Thanksgiving weekend. So that's good. I've got your discussion posted today, so you can work on that if you want to. And I will try to get you the study guide to the quiz. Let's see, today's Wednesday. I'll try to have that to you by Friday. Okay? Sound good?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Now, in the meantime, there's because you're doing 2 chapters. You're doing a chapter I think 9 and 10. You're doing the chapter on unemployment and on inflation. You've got more than the normal amount of reading and videos, con videos to watch. So make sure you watch those because they're very, very useful. Okay, very good, very helpful. Okay, so let me just real quick come over here and take attendance. Let's see. We have Grace is here. Let me pick a color. Let me pick orange. Grace is here. Stephanie's here. How about Mary Ann? I didn't see her. Olivia. Caitlin. Emma. Emma's here. Thank you for coming, guys. Okay. Crazy guy race. Emma did. Who am I missing here? Caroline. Sarah. Hi. Caroline.
Hello.
I never can figure out. Mary Ann. Mary Ann, how are you? She says, I'm fine.
Lucia's here too. Sorry.
No, I'm going to get everybody. Don't worry. I'm not going to go until I make sure. Because see the problem, and Sebastian, the problem is, guys, I can only see 4. Hey, I can only see 4 of you at a time. So I got to keep clicking through to make sure I have it. So let's see. Larry's here. How about that? Good to see you. Lawrence. Yeah. So, let's see. Who am I missing here?
I don't think you got me.
Who's me?
Katie.
Katie.
No, I'm good. Yeah, no, so.
Number 8.
Thank you. Man, my brain. There it is. Went by it 3 times. So Katie, how come I'm not seeing you? I'm not seeing you. You gotta be
You're clicked on my box right now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, now one more, right? There's somebody else?
Yeah, Lucy. Number 12.
Lucy. Yeah. Sorry about that. I'm not seeing you for some reason, so I apologize. Okay. Wow, good show. So, hey, Larry, where's Will? Is he at a practice?
Yeah, he's got water polo.
Okay. Now here's the thing, guys. I know you're on the West Coast. See, Will and Larry and Owen are in California. This is a hard time for them. The only problem is if I did it at 7 o'clock their time, it would be really late our time. So we're trying to figure this out. But if you can't come in, just watch the recordings, okay? All right. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Once all the.
Okay. All right. You're breaking up, man. You're way out there on the West Coast. Okay. So I got everyone. Everyone who's here. Anybody I didn't get? Okay. Also, I haven't made this totally official. Okay. But if you score 95 or higher on the quiz, and you can't come in, and for something happens, and you can't make the if you can't make either of the sessions, but you still score a 95 on the quiz, then I'll waive your then I'll credit you for being here, because if you scored a 95 or higher on the quiz and a 90 or higher on the assignment, it means that you did your work. Okay, but try to come in, because it's always helpful to be here and get to ask questions if you want to. Okay. And that's all I have. I should have stopped the recording. And so if you guys don't have any questions, then I will say, well, that's what I should do. I should click on this scene. Okay, now I can see everybody.